Perfect. Well, Lindsay, I think we have everybody live. I think you're ready to go.
Yeah, I guess we'll have a few people joining us afterwards, but we'll get started to honor everyone's time. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, and thanks for joining us. My name's Lindsay Evenden, and I'm one of the partners at Boreala Management. So before getting into our main content, I wanted to share with you a bit about Boreala and what we do for those that don't already know us. Boreala Management is a consulting company headquartered in Montreal, but we do support clients across the country with their human resources and organizational effectiveness needs. We have a team of subject matter experts in various domains, and we offer consulting services across 6 service lines: strategy, culture, and team engagement, organizational effectiveness and governance, human resource fundamentals, talent management, compensation, and organizational transformation and change management. So I'm delighted to have with us today one of my long-term collaborators, Josette Lapierre, and she's going to share with us some insights on the big impact of small projects. But before we get started, you should have a poll that's appeared, and I just invite you to take a couple of seconds to respond because we are interested in finding out who we have with us today. So I'm sure that for most of you joining us today, the current situation with COVID-19 has had an impact on progressing and moving ahead with your projects, both at home and at work. And for many initiatives and priorities that you had been working on back in March, you've probably had to take a step back. So now that the deconfinement process has started, it still seems that we're facing quite a few months of uncertainty. And for many, finding motivation and purpose can be challenging. So Josette is joining us today to explain how focusing on and leveraging small projects can help build momentum. And she's going to share some tools and techniques to help keep you focused and find the energy to keep things moving ahead. So we encourage your questions. I'm going to be monitoring the chat throughout, and we do have time at the end. So please do add your questions to the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to hand back over to Josette.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks so much. That was a great introduction. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for the opportunity to meet your clients and colleagues. And I'm seeing a few familiar faces online. I can't say that I'm seeing everyone, but I'm going to say hi to Mike that I know that I can see, and I'll figure a way out to go down the list of participants. I'm seeing that we have managers and consultants and trainers, and that we have individual contributors also that are part of this discussion. So that is awesome. We're going to try to address every angle here as we move forward. Now, I am coming to you. Should I share the statistics? I'm not sure. Can you see the results of the poll?
We saw those. Yeah.
You saw those. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Okay, so I want to make sure that everyone has seen them. So I am coming to you from my office in Montreal. And in this presentation today, I'll be pulling from my experience with local and international clients that are running projects big and small. Now we have a plan for you today. Our presentation is scheduled to last approximately half an hour with a Q&A period afterwards. But please, again, as Lindsay suggested, if you have any ideas or questions or comments as we're going through this, just put them in there in the chat room or in our conversation tool, and we will get to them for sure at the end. So my plan today is to convey to you the importance of having goals, of having small projects and having the impactful projects in your organization. I will also share my secret tool to engage and motivate individuals so they get going and they stay the course. And because we have lots going on and everyone has lots going on, I will share with you a fun and a helpful way to visualize work and stay on track from ideation to delivery. Now, but first, I'd like to start with what brought about this conversation here today. Now, after 30 years of working in projects, I've seen organizations, and I'm sure a lot of you have also, you've seen organizations transform and transition or go through tough times. And a good thing for me is that not all of my clients, local or international and in different industry, were going through these types of transition all at the same time. But in the face of uncertainty that comes with change, no matter who you are or what your mission is, there are some hard truths about people and how they react and how and what is going to help when we're going through changes. And there's also hard truths about, setting goals and the impact that small projects have on change. And this year, every one of us, globally, we've experienced this phenomenon of change together. And I saw my clients and my family and my friends, I'm sure you did too, go through this transition. And we did almost all at the same time. I guess starting in early March, we were all busy trying to keep up with our original objectives and task lists and routines. But pretty quickly, there was a lot of uncertainty in it, and it affected, individual and organizational focus. I certainly saw it. Projects were being put on hold, and not everything was progressing as planned. It was pretty unclear where we should be spending, the right energy at that point. Then I think, somewhere around mid-April, we pretty much bottomed out. I know this is a depressing picture, but, there was a point in time, pretty much all there. The organizations I work with and the individuals I work with, I could feel that there was a lot of stress. Sporting competitions were canceled, cultural events were canceled. My daughter's, university graduation was canceled. I saw IT implementations postponed. The training projects were delayed. Store openings, a friend of mine's store opening didn't occur, and the list goes on and on. So a good thing is that there were lots of communication going on, and that is a great thing. And I commend all of you who were part of that. But as this was happening, we were reminding everyone that it's not, communication is not the only way out of the situations and of the situation, and that we really needed to get out of our heads and into our bodies. And so project work has always been a way to move forward and provide, a sense of accomplishment. Because when you set new goals and small ones, and when we allow ourselves to not look for perfection and be creating and be creative and get going in complex context, I think that if we try to focus on doing and on trying and on learning, we find energy and we find a sense of accomplishment. And again, we were getting out of our heads and into our bodies. And, we may be very successful, and we've seen a lot of success stories locally and abroad, and that is awesome. And, we've seen a lot of opportunities. It's allowed people to, come together and accomplish great things, and certainly build a new story. And this was all happening because people decided to invest in small ideas, small initiatives. And, most of us, and I think, I've heard so many great stories. We even grew through this process. We learned about what our real motivations are, and what really makes us and our surroundings happier and better. And so, in fact, these small projects, these small actions that we decided to take on, they had a huge impact. And that's the general idea. When we're working on projects, we tend to focus in the day-to-day going really fast. We tend to focus on outputs and things that need to be done, but we really should be looking at the outcomes of doing small initiatives. The process, the journey is where the growing comes from. So it's really important. Now, I may be suggesting that small projects are really important, and I think they're the way to go. But not all projects are small, we know. And some we don't want to stop, even in the most complex situations. And so, I know that you have big projects ongoing, and they've continued through this change, and that's great. But you know what? Big projects have something going on for them, is that they don't go unnoticed. They really get attention, and they get the resources they deserve. And that is not always the case with small projects. Now, I've been talking about small projects, and so maybe it's a good idea that I be a bit clearer in terms of what those are. Now, and again, as I suggest that we work on small projects, big projects can be broken down into smaller projects. So you want to be looking, when we talk about small projects, you want to be looking for those that have, provide you with quick wins that can be done with a smaller team in a shorter time frame. And that way you don't need to apply the big management structures to them. Now, doing small projects, being agile and nimble, it's not a new idea. We've been discussing agility and responsiveness and learning organizations for years. And small projects are the tool you can leverage for this purpose today. And after we've come to feel like comfortable in this new reality, they are still a great tool for agility and responsiveness. Okay, so what do I propose? I know that you've got lots of small projects underway, and you've got big projects also, and you have new project ideas coming up all the time. I was participating, maybe as an example, I was participating as in a couple webinars recently about the safe return to office, and I was seeing so many projects, new projects coming on. You have to update your policies, you have to create questionnaires, you have to purchase the materials, you have to train and communicate some more. And so I know that we have lots going on, and it's going to have an impact on our routine. And so how do we go from an idea to getting things done? And how do we do that and stay on track? Right? And especially since things seem to fall off track somewhere in between. And so a fun way, I said I would provide a tool. It's a fun way, and it's actually a very efficient way to manage information and to manage process and discussions. So we keep track and keep moving in terms of ideas and projects, is to use visual management tools. Now, this is not a new idea. It actually was, this is actually comes from manufacturing and the middle of the previous century. But to explain what visual management is, I've decided, or allow me to show you this simple example. But it's powerful. This is an at-home version of a project board. So maybe useful for anyone here who have kids at home. So visual boards, they provide visibility. That's one thing. It's really important. They provide visibility on assignments. Those would be the cards on a visual board. They would provide visibility on progression. Those are the columns. And they provide visibility of milestones. And those are the transitions, or when we move things from cards from one column to another. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate that many conversations that need to occur, or that could occur around maybe even the cards themselves. What is this thing that needs to be done, and who's taking care of it? And then even conversation in terms of like moving them or having them progress. Is it ready to move forward? Should it be moved back? Is it really completed? So visual tools are really interesting. Now, I know that you and I can see here in the images, for those who have opened their cameras, that most of you are working from home. And I know that you can't be using visual, paper versions. We are mostly working remotely today and can't gather around real closely. But then again, isn't that our reality all the time? Are we not, in our reality today, working with people who are remote in our regular day, regular work habits? So what I have prepared for you is a project board. It's on Trello. It's an electronic version of a project board, and it's free to use, and it's web-based, so anyone can access it remotely. And it has all of the same components as a paper version, with cards and columns and easy to move them around. I've actually even put in instructions in there for you if you want to use that. Now, again, as we, at the end of this session, Lindsay will give you the information on how we'll send this to you if you want to use this. So allow me to explain how this really works, because for this to work, it needs to be embedded in your work habits. It needs to be top of mind, because every different step requires a different approach. If you need to shift your mindset, if you want to use this and have its full potential impact. So what does it look like? I'll start with the first step, which is ideas, ideation. Now, here it's about creativity, it's about release, it's about creating a space where we can brain dump our ideas. It's also an opportunity to be clear about our goals and to provide clarity, on our near future. Now, we have some managers on the line, and so if you're a manager, you want to create a moment when all of your team can think outside the box, and you want to help individuals, think off the wall and be a bit crazy here. And you want to create a repository for these great ideas. It's really a visual representation of, I've heard you, I get it, and here it is. I'm bringing it up for all to see. Now, if you're a collaborator, you want to make sure that you keep track of your ideas. So if you're talking to clients, if you're using a system or a process at work and you see that there's opportunities to make it better, don't just start doing it. Take note of it. And when the opportunity arises, just propose it, and so that we keep track of it. Now, again, this is the idea of a visual process. It reinforces the fact that we want ideas, but because it's a process, not all ideas will move forward. They need to get clearance before they move forward. And that's really important. I've seen too many ideas in organizations go from idea to get going, and we're lacking a lot of information. I told you I would share my secret tool for making sure that the ideas that move forward are the right ones and that they stay on track, and that we have the energy to go through every step. And that's my small project promise. For those who have more experience around projects, this is the actual project charter or the scope statement that is a standard practice when we're managing projects. Now, we've been discussing the importance of this tool forever, but in this situation today, this tool is more important than ever. Okay, it is the output of the idea step. It reflects the choice of an idea or a combination of ideas. It defines the impact that this idea can have on the organization, on its people, on its systems, on its clients, on its collaborators, and even on its stakeholders. As a project is being realized and as a project delivers, it provides an outcome. But there are always, at the same time, when the project moves forward, there will be lots of opportunity to get sidetracked. And there'll be difficulties along the way. And there'll be questions also because the context is still unclear. So if you want to move a project forward, you want to make sure that it is very meaningful. And for that, I suggest that you have strong whys. So if you've ever heard Start with the Why, that's one reference that we can share also with our audience. But make sure that you ask a lot of whys, and make sure you don't move forward any project that doesn't answer many opportunity, or that doesn't have strong motivation. Okay, again, especially in this turbulent time. Actually, in some organizations, we're not going to move anything forward at any time if it doesn't have 2 or 3 or 4 valid reasons to move forward, some of which involving learning as the project is moving forward. So in the small project, big impact workbook that we send you, this project spine will be made available to you. Now, if we have this idea, that we want to move forward, again, not all ideas will ever make it through. Okay, and it's not always easy to say no, but sometimes you need to say no. But the reality is, for some great ideas to move forward, you need to have like a couple just okay ideas. So more is better in the ideas section. But as you progress, you want to limit the quantity of work that moves forward. So where to next? Is it the to-do list? Well, Mike says, yeah. I've actually renamed this one. Okay, so from to do to good to go. And this is important. I find this is very important. Again, I mean, we've been discussing this before, but again, in this context, it's even more important. Because when we're looking at tools and when we're looking at processes there to implement, we look for things that make our lives easier and also that make them simpler, and certainly not those that add more stress. So if we were to call this the to-do list, and if I wish I had the raise of hands, we all have a to-do list. But when we put things in our to-do list, and because we, as a race, are completionists, we tend to want to, tick things that are on the to-do list. Just putting items in a to-do list creates stress. So I don't want you to do that. Okay. So this step is really about taking care of all the practical things. It's about saying, it's a great idea. It's good to go. We'd love to do it, but we have to make sure that we have availability and that we have the competencies and that we have the tool. And it really, this step, this conversation is something that should be done as a group. So managers out there, I don't want you to be doing this alone. So there's questions to be asked, there are conversations to be had. And if you're an individual contributor, I want you to be reaching out and saying when you feel overloaded, or if you feel that you have some bandwidth to move up to work on projects. Now, in this, there are many ways for, the reality is, and I know it, and it's the reality everywhere, is that there's assignments everywhere. There's a lack of visibility of these assignments, but there's a lot of assignments that have been thrown out there. Could you do this? Would you mind doing that? We get emails, we get calls, we're continuously adding things on our to-do list. And then we get another call from the same person asking us, it seems to have forgotten, they've asked us something else yesterday, suddenly they're asking something new today. And so we want to make sure that we move things forward in a way that is sustainable for the organization. And I have to say, when and how things start or don't start in organizations, it has a lot of meaning. Things are started without any practical considerations, it has impact. So it's the next step. This is where we get going. This is where we do this stuff, right? This is our doing list. Now, at this stage, if you've implemented this process and you're using this at this stage, the projects, the individuals, the teams, the bandwidth, everything is right. We've got the right expertise, the right tools, the right motivation to follow through. So it's really time to put on your coaching hat. Now, this applies to everyone, whether you're a manager or an individual. Okay. If you're a manager, I want you to resist the urge to micromanage here, especially if you've kept your projects small. If they're small, when you look at them, the tasks, they're just right below the waterline. So it's pretty easy to see them. It's pretty easy to fall into that trap. So resist that urge. You've done everything that needed to be done. So help the people on your team, the individuals or the teams, help them take a step back, focus on the process, discuss how work is being done. Just make sure that you celebrate, follow through, and reinforce the positive. When is it Obama? She says, when people go down, we go up, right? If people are struggling, just be that person that provides a positive energy for them. Now, if you're the person doing the work and you don't have the opportunity to speak to your manager every day, well, I suggest you be your own coach. I want you to stop and think. We talk about a lot about mindfulness, but stop and think. Plan your days. Ideally, maybe the night before. Look at all of these things that need to be done, because from these projects, you have things to do. We're at the task level at this point. Make sure that you move into your daily schedule only the ones that you can really get, start and complete. Find ways to focus, to start work, stay focused, don't multitask. Seek support, have people from your team. If you don't have your manager available, like friends or colleagues, have people who are positive and can help you stay the course. As usual, you want to take timeouts here as you progress. The great thing about doing is that we're learning, and every step that we take, every thing that we do gets us closer to achieving the goal. And we saw it previously. Sometimes, there's great learning from even mistakes. That is something that can happen, but it's part of the process. You may have noticed that on these screens, I've been discussing potential questions or conversation starters. The idea, again, is that tools to stay on track. Now, if you've done it, well, just a reminder, positive leaders are most sought after today. And they're the ones that focus on strength. And they're the ones that have helped define, they help individuals define their own strategies and find their own solutions. And they're the ones who really see you as what you can be, and not necessarily what's happening today. So, don't be a micromanager. There's not that much appetite for micromanager leaders out there today. So this is our last stop in terms of how do we make sure that projects stay the course and stay on track. I mean, they have to come to fruition and make it all the way to the done stage. And that's really a problem with small projects, because we don't give them the visibility. They end up being often like an exploded quantity of small tasks that have been dispersed in everyone's agenda and that are being managed individually without, any clear coordination. And so those, managing projects that way, that they never stop, they never come to an end, or when they do, we don't know. Then maybe, they're reborn as the completion of it provides new ideas and new opportunities. So we really want to, if we're marking the start of a project, we want to mark the end. And so on a regular basis, every couple of weeks or every week, when we're meeting as a team or when we're doing our one-on-ones, we want to be looking at those projects that we initiated 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, and we want to make sure that they've reached their destination and that we're ready to close them out, and that we, capture ideas and send them back at the beginning of the line, and not get those started, automatically, because we've said going from ideas to just get going is an issue. It's not a good idea. Okay. Now, if you're a manager here, you want to make sure that you help the individuals in your team see that something has finished, allow them to discuss it with you, remind them of all of the administrative work around closing out and delivering to your client. For sure, allow them to take a step back and recharge their batteries. We don't do that often. Doesn't mean taking a week off, but it means something. You need to figure out what that means for each individual in your team, how they recharge their batteries, and help make sure that happens. And you know how you're going to know that it has happened? Well, they're going to have new ideas, and we're just going to start all over again. That's how we know we've recharged. So I hope that this visual tool or the concept it supports can be of help to you, and that you see how it can help you stay on track of what needs to be done for the right small projects, the purposeful ones, the ones that are motivating, for those to get going and stay on track and deliver the product, the output, and the outcomes for which they started. So if I wrap up, and as I get ready to end this presentation, I don't see the time. I'm hoping we're on time. And as we get ready to answer any questions, or if anyone has any comments, those are also are welcome. I want to remind you that small projects are good in any context. And if you hear about agility and if you talk about resilience, small projects, they're the tool for you. Meaning is very important. If you focus on meaning, you give your project traction and you give them energy to progress. And workflows, visibility is very, very important to be able to really see what is happening out there and how everyone is dealing with all of the work that's being done and also what's happening with the context. Now that's pretty much it for my presentation. And I know that in the coming days, we'll be sending you the recording of this webinar. And we'll also be sending you a link to this Trello tool so it's not Trello, it's a board that I created within the Trello, on the Trello platform. And we'll be making our small project, big impact workbook available for you. It's actually a way for you to take notes on your project, on the smaller projects. They're not intended for the huge projects. And that's pretty much it for my conversation, for my presentation.
So we do have some questions, Josette.
Yeah,
so
I'll transfer it on to you because I did not see the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I've been taking a note of those, and this was an awesome, really great way of just reminding ourselves of the importance of, for me, certainly the idea of the Kanban and just noting down those ideas. It's something that I know that I need to get better at, and then that whole concept of, good to go. So there's so many ideas that we're thinking of and not always taking stock of them, taking a moment just to write them down and to kind of digest them and then decide how to kind of move ahead with them. So a couple of questions that we had along the same lines, really. So the first one being, how do you bring people along with you? So, it's all fine well that, we're trying to pull our heads out of this, the fog of COVID and get moving on small projects. But like, do you have any tips and tricks for kind of energizing other people to kind of do that with you?
To implement the workflow?
To kind of get on board with the importance of small projects, like any kind of, as a coach, like, do you have any tips and tricks that you can share with some of the managers in the team that can maybe engage their team?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and something that I'd love to do with my clients and my coachees, is always have them look at their to-do list. We always start with that. And so it's like, look at your to-do list and how many of these components in your to-do list are things that you can actually like tick off like in one sitting, like in 20, like I use a Pomodoro technique, so like 25 or 50 minutes. So how many of these can you just really tick off in a couple minutes? And if you have some elements in your to-do list that are bigger than just, find a new supplier, there's probably lots of tasks in there. Identify those as projects and as small projects, and bring them, give them visibility. So if you're a manager, ask your teams or your directs to identify everything in their to-do that is a project and not just a simple task. Bring them together, have the conversation. Do we have the situation of the exploded project that's ended up in everyone's to-do? And is everyone giving it the same priority? Should we take a step back, reconvene, and get reorganized around that? Sometimes that is the case. Also help individuals, again, focus every day on getting things done. If we are, again, micromanagers, and if we throw too much work at our people without following through and figuring out where things are in the process and how capable, our teams are in actually delivering on these assignments that we've given them, it will have an impact. So yeah, for me, it's about conversations, but it's about creating some kind of the visual. The reason I like the Kanban, and it's a long answer, but I'll finish with that. In times of change, it seems like everything is up in the air. We're juggling so many balls. Everything is up in the air. You don't know what, everything is changing. Having a process, a simple and visual one available, is a tool, because the process itself, it doesn't change. That provides stability. And so you could take the balls and just sort of put them in the right columns. And if you need to be moving tasks around, you know what conversations need to be had. And we have clear visibility. So again, transparency is huge. Would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually the other question that we had along those lines, and some of your responses might be similar for this one, it's how do you manage resistance? So if you've got people that are really resisting in a small project, how do you deal with that versus in a large project where maybe the levers of dealing with like having disciplinary actions or whatever, if people are not delivering on what they're supposed to be delivering on in a big project, how would that apply with a small project?
So in small projects, we tend to see the resistance more, right? Because, we have a limited amount of people and there are limited steps, and there's usually, very tasks that need to be delivered, very quickly. And so it's could be easy to see resistance. And if I hear correctly, resistance usually sounds like, oh, I didn't have time. I'm going to take care of it. I just haven't taken care of it now. Or it could be outright resistance, like I don't want to do this. So it varies. The tool. So again, maybe a bit of my coaching background, but the tool for me is to ask questions. Now, resistance is information. It's someone that is seeing something that I may not be seeing, or is seeing the same thing I'm seeing, but from a different angle. So it's all about reaching out and asking questions and doing some real listening, and finding ways that if someone does not want to move forward because they're seeing an obstacle, working with them so they find a way around, that they find another motivating factor for moving a project forward. Now, if you're a leader, honestly, if there's no motivation and there's a lot of resistance, things are simply not going to progress. So you certainly need to address it. So my answer would be questions is the best tool.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned here, Matthew had added this to the chat, that somebody had said that they try to match people with what brings them energy and what skill sets they have towards a project. So making that match, I think, is really vital to trying to avoid that resistance. So I think that's a really great comment from
that's a super comment. Then at the same time, you could say, you know what, for sure, that's where motivation comes from, right? People like working in groups. So sometimes they have this skill set and they're in a situation that usually should motivate them, and still you're getting resistance. It's like they're not seeing it. And so sometimes it's about changing the angle and showing them within their perspective how this can work for them. And the last thing I would say is sometimes we use projects to learn and grow also. But sometimes there's also a bit of a stretch. So there will be people who may be a bit scared. It may be a bit scary because in some instances we will ask people to, through the project, to up their skills.
Yeah, adding accountability.
To provide them with the support, yeah.
Yeah. So a more technical question here. So in using the Kanban system, how can you account for variability and complexity in projects? So, you're going through that process of ideation and then moving it to good to go. So is there any tips and tricks to looking for kind of doing that analysis on the complexity and the variability?
I want to make sure that I I capture this question
Yeah.
correctly. Can you give me a bit more information? What do you mean by
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking is, you know, if you have a whole bunch of ideas that's in your ideation stage, I mean, this is and correct me, whoever sent this question in can clarify if I'm misquoting, but I'm thinking it's like, how do you go
or we could
through
put
that?
their mic on.
Yeah, or put your mic on. Going through that process of deciding, like, okay, how complex is this, and how am I going to, when I'm moving it to the good to go, is there like a stage of analyzing how much resources, how complex, etc., etc.
Yes. So for sure, the good to go stage is there. And Mathieu, if you can help us unmute whomever has asked this question, that would be great. I'm not seeing on screen, but the good to go stage is super important. Again, that is really where you're going to ask these questions, right? And so you're actually progressing. You know, in terms of your project, you're moving forward. When you're in the good to go, you can spend some time. You can actually have a small team set up to define, you know, from this small project promise, what are the real requirements to move this forward? Is it, and you know, it could be like a half-hour discussion, and then it could be like a 2-week thing to look at it in detail and find the best strategy to make it as small as possible, as impactful as possible, but have a clear sense of who needs to be involved and how much time they would need to invest, and what tools we would need, what skills also we would need. And so with that in mind, then we look for when is the time to move it to the next stage. So just to finish there, in your good to go, we usually have like a variety of different types of projects, which is why having a visual board, you would keep the same visual board for very complex and not so complex projects, because sometimes in the good to go, you have these small initiatives, they're very easy, they can't move forward, they have other ones that are more complex. And if you have some bandwidth, you can move it an easy one. And then when you have more bandwidth and you have all of the criteria ticked off, then you can move a more complex one. The good to go area of this process is very, very important, because there's questions like, well, should I really move this small one, or should I wait a bit till there's even more bandwidth and I can move forward this other bigger idea? So these are all great conversations to have with your team. And it allows you as a manager to learn about your organization and to continue progressing around ideas. Only make sure that when we talk about being focused, that means we start something and we can finish it. So this is the same idea at the project level. Don't move it. So it's not a to-do, no stress. And if it's into good to go, don't move it forward until you can actually start it and stop it. Ideally within a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Great. So that's all the questions that came in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? I see that some people have their cameras on, some people I guess most people are muted, but if anyone does, I would give you the opportunity now before we wrap. Everyone's quiet. Everyone's always quiet on these things. That's why it's so much easier just to throw the questions in the chat. That's why I appreciate people doing that. So I have just one other question for you myself, Josette. You mentioned Trello as a platform that people can use, and we are going to be following up with the participants of today's session and giving them some more information. Are there other online visual electronic support tools that people might want to note down to consider, or is Trello really your kind of go-to for these kinds of projects?
I mean, if you're looking for a free option, if you're looking for something that is easy to use and works with this type of situation, and that also can be eventually that you can build upon, I think Trello is a good tool. There are other ones out there. I do not know all of them, but they all have like a free option. So the answer is there are some. I don't know all of them. I could say the Trello is something that's always been very useful, and it's as common to this type of work as Outlook would be for email.
Yeah, awesome. So to wrap us up for today, I wanted to thank you, Josette, for coming in and sharing these tips and tricks. I think that, these webinars, there's so many webinars going on right now, and I think there's always some, if you can, spend 45 minutes of your time getting some tips, tricks, some valuable insights, it's always great. I'm just going to check that we have one final question. Sorry, guys, I'm just going to throw this at you, Josette. Sometimes it's difficult to get a team to use new tools. So do you have any hints? That's a good one. Yes.
That's not going to happen with Trello because it's so cool.
People are going to love it. Yeah.
I mean, you know what? You should just you can just create one for. You know what's going to happen if people start using this? If you start using it with your teams, individuals will start using it for even their projects. They'll create a board just for their projects, and they'll start putting in their tasks, and they'll move their tasks around, and then they'll have their personal boards. And so, I mean, it is going to happen. Not everyone is going to want to use an electronic version. So provide them with the support or an alternative. Have them send you ideas through email or capture their ideas. Manipulate the tool for them. I use that in meeting settings where we're having, there's always an agenda item when we look at our, project pipeline and we discuss projects, and, it's like a ceremony. And I actually take a card and move it to the next column.
Yeah. One bit of advice I would give as well is be consistent, because I think that people get a bit overloaded with, you're introducing this tool and then, another team is introducing this tool. If there's any way that there can be some consistency in the tool that your organization decides to use for something like this, I think that will help people being more open to using it. And even if they're resisting, well, they can only resist for so long. So as discussed, you'll see the email address there for Boreala. If you, we will be sending out the recording of today. Flip me a message, let me know if you want to receive a copy of that notebook. I'll follow up with you, make sure that you have it, access to the visual that Josette had put together. If you have any more questions for us or want more information on Josette, please do let us know. But I'm delighted that you joined us, Josette. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for everyone else taking an hour out of their day to join us. And keep looking out for further webinars from Boreala, because we do plan on hosting more of these.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lindsay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for being there. Bye.